OK, so the vast majority of illegal migrants coming from Afghanistan are not women and girls, they're men. The majority of them are fighting-age men. And so the question we would ask is, who's sticking up for British women? Because, I was asked recently, I appreciate you didn't use this phrase, why would you send people back to, quote, woman-hating Afghanistan? Why are so many men from, quote, woman-hating Afghanistan being allowed to turn up on our beaches uninvited?
My question was about the women.
Well, our priority, and we make no apologies for this, is British people, British girls and British women.
Oliver here. What you are about to watch is a brutal immigration confrontation where Zia Yusuf is pressed hard by Ed Balls and Susanna Reid. But instead of backing off, he keeps dragging the debate back to one thing: whether the British state is actually willing to put its own people first. This starts with digital ID cards and illegal entry, but very quickly turns into something much bigger: deportations, asylum claims, returns to countries like Afghanistan and Iran. And the question every party tries to dodge when the cameras are on: who exactly is this system meant to protect? And that is why this clip matters, because once the talking points run out, what is left is a very direct test of political will, whether reform can defend its immigration agenda under pressure, and whether Labour's position still makes any sense to ordinary voters watching all of this unfold. If you want more breakdowns that focus on what really happens when these arguments get tested live, make sure you like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you think. Now let's get into it.
Government efficiency, their own Doge, Zia Yusuf. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Right. What do you think of digital ID cards? Your party is huge on migration and tackling illegal migration. This is part of the government's plans. Is it something you back?
Well, people watching this programme can ask themselves, do they think the people smuggling gangs, when they're ushering these illegal migrants onto dinghies in France, are checking ID? No, they're not. And what is happening routinely, of course, is that these illegal migrants are throwing what ID they may have, whatever identification documents may have, into the channel. One of the things that the legislation we will pass when Nigel's Prime Minister will be to, for example, make it illegal, a criminal offence, if you're coming to the country illegally, to deliberately destroy your documents. One of the things ID cards does is
Hang on a moment, but
impact.
if someone's coming here illegally, do they care that you're also going to treat them as illegal because they've thrown away their passport?
Well, we're talking about a serious criminal offence punishable by up to 5 years in prison, not just being taken to a detention facility and then deported. But, look, this is, again, a very performative thing to get a press release without having any impact.
Sorry, how would you know that they'd thrown away their passport?
Well, there would need to be the threshold of evidence that they've done that. There's obviously a whole host of surveillance.
So someone just comes and says, look, I'm being persecuted in the country I've come from.
Yeah.
They stole my passport and here I am illegally. And how do you prove otherwise?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that you can surveil the channel, for example. The channel is easily surveillable and actually routinely is.
What
the problem
do you mean?
at the moment, through drones, I mean, our Royal Navy is more than capable of knowing what's actually going on in the channel.
Someone's escaping the Taliban in Afghanistan, for instance. OK, they've come quite a long way to get eventually to northern France. But clearly, because they're being smuggled or it's illegal, they haven't carried their passport with them. So how do you use channel surveillance to establish that they threw it over the side of the boat before they came?
Some may have done, some may not have done. There's many, many accounts from people, including Border Force, who've said they have routinely seen illegal migrants destroy their identity documents.
I'm just suggesting it's entirely impractical what you're proposing.
In what way is it impractical?
Because how on earth would you prove that someone's thrown away their passport?
Well, we're talking about one aspect of the legislation, again, partly as a deterrent. But with regards to ID cards here, we are talking again about a press release. It's an opportunity to try and talk about this issue in a news cycle without doing anything to actually address the fundamental issue. And even worse, it will impact and impede the lives of law-abiding citizens. The people watching this programme, they already have ID documents. They don't need this. So what's going to happen is those people, as is often the case, sadly, and has been the case for decades, laws are passed which impede the lives of law-abiding citizens and do nothing to actually address the issue of these people who don't want to be found.
I think that there will be a lot of people who heard your plan to deport 600,000 people and felt a chill go through them. Because how on earth do you establish who the 600,000 are that you're going to deport over the course of a parliament? We've seen over in the States, and I know that you sort of compare this policy to Trump, people get caught up in it. We know that governments mistake who's here legally and illegally. We've seen this in the Windrush scandal. So without a digital ID and without people having passports, How do you establish who 600,000 illegal immigrants are?
Well, firstly, I'm not sure who you're speaking to. We've moved up around 3 to 4 points in the polls that have come out since we announced Operation Restoring Justice. So there are a lot of people who are very pleased to see finally there's a party who are interested in restoring the social contract again. We cannot have so many people in this country illegally taking from the system, which British taxpayers, people watching this programme, are going to work, probably on their way to work as we speak, in part to pay taxes to put some of these people up in hotels and get benefits. It's unsustainable. So something has to be done. In terms of how we identify those people, well, let's do it in a way that doesn't impede the lives of law-abiding citizens. Again, we're getting...
How?
We need a few different things. So, number one, we need to change the legislation. So one of the massive problems we have at the moment is whenever deportations are attempted, the deportations are stopped. They are frustrated by judges because of the European Court of Human Rights. We're still not at a stage where Labour are willing to leave that. But even that will not be enough. We then need to disapply some of these international treaties, at least on a temporary basis, in the UK. That would include, for example, the 1951 Refugee Convention. And then what we also say, Susanna, is anyone who came to the country illegally will never be granted asylum, end of story. That is how you deal with this issue. And then you can start a large-scale operational programme to ensure that those deportations happen.
I want to ask you about Afghanistan, because people come from Afghanistan, women, for instance, who have an absolutely appalling experience under the Taliban. You might establish that they're not here legally. But we don't think that the Taliban is a reasonable government, and we don't think it's a reasonable country to return people to. We don't have any sort of treaty with the Taliban. What are we going to do about people where we have serious concerns about what we would return them to?
OK, so the vast majority of illegal migrants coming from Afghanistan are not women and girls. They're men. The majority of them are fighting-age men. And so the question we would ask is, who's sticking up for British women? Because, I was asked recently, I appreciate you didn't use this phrase, why would you send people back to, quote, woman-hating Afghanistan? Why are so many men from, quote, woman-hating Afghanistan being allowed to turn up on our beaches uninvited?
My question was about the women.
Well, our priority, and we make no apologies for this, is British people, British girls and British women.
Do you think
we need to stand up for them. We need to stand up for them.
To British women?
Well, again, the reason we are so focused on ensuring that this gets done is because the vast majority of the people illegally in this country from Afghanistan, I've seen these numbers, are men. In fact,
so are you only going to target the men and not target the women?
Well, deportation command would be foolish, Susanna, for deportation command to start when we've got probably north of 1 million illegal migrants in this country, at least, to start focusing on women and girls. The best estimates, but the total population of women and girls from Afghanistan in this country at sub 2,000. We're talking about 0.2% of the total population. We will start with the men. We will start with the fighting-age men. They are the ones, by the way, who people watching this programme are most worried about.
And you've allocated £2 billion to pay countries to take returns. You've said, Nigel Farage said last week, that that would include countries like Afghanistan, Iran. You've said it wouldn't be women and children. If you are a gay man who's come to Britain to claim asylum from Iran or Afghanistan, of fighting age, a gay man, would you return a gay man to Iran?
Our priority will be the British people. I want to keep saying that. I want to say...
So the answer is you would return a gay... Because in Iran, being gay is not only illegal, but it is punishable with flogging through to the death penalty. But you're saying you would return a gay man to Iran.
Why does it appear to be that we're OK with the vast majority of the people coming from Iran are fighting-age men as well? In fact, some of them, very well-sourced stories suggest had a potential terrorist attack foiled by our security services. 4 men from Iran who turned up on a boat. Our priority, and Nigel's priority when he's Prime Minister, will be the British people. And we make no apologies for that. The nature of being in
government is, because you referred to him as Prime Minister Nigel Farage, if you're in government, you have to be able to answer the difficult questions. That's what government ministers do. That's what you need to do as well. You would return a fighting-age gay man to Iran or Afghanistan. I think, that is a perfectly legitimate thing to say, because you're saying we're prioritising the rights of British people and not the rights of an asylum-claiming prime-age man who is gay. They would go back to Iran or Afghanistan. I think the answer is yes.
So what I'm saying today is we make no apology for saying that this issue needs to be sorted out and we're going to prioritise British
you would
people.
return gay men.
But let me also be clear about something. You're asking me about Afghanistan.
Well,
we came out and talked about Afghanistan, and the Home Secretary then came out the very next day and said they would consider doing a deal with Afghanistan. Right. You look at Iraq.
Of course.
And by the way, Germany's already returning illegal migrants to Afghanistan, albeit via Qatar as an intermediary. And this Labour government has done a return agreement with Iraq. And I would put it to you, Ed, that gay people don't have a particularly nice time in Iraq either. Look, the world is unfortunately, as Nigel has already said, he cannot be held, if the British people see fit to vote him in as Prime Minister, he cannot be held accountable for the actions of every despotic regime. We will, of course, not deliberately send anyone back to get tortured or harmed in any way. But we make no apologies. We have north of 1 million people in this country illegally. That number is growing. The pace of people arriving is accelerating. We cannot afford it. It's totally unfair on the people watching this programme.
Deportation sites, I mean, you're going to have a huge number of big sites for 24,000 a month to be held. Have you identified yet, through your Doge work, have you identified your first site where you'd be able to build one of these camps?
So we've got a long list and a short list. But if you look at...
Just give us one name.
No, here's the reason we won't give names, Ed. If we give the names, if we give the names now, prior to the manifesto, ahead of the next general election, I'll tell you what will happen.
So the
Labour government will sell them off and they'll become a solar farm.
Names in the manifesto,
what will happen.
then. So you will have names of the camps in the manifesto.
We have already been clear, Ed. We've already been clear about where we will put these. There will be in remote locations. It will be modular. And you know what's most important here? What's most important? They will be detained. They will not be allowed to... One of the reasons there's so much understandable concern about this and the protests, which we sympathise with, from a lot of worried mums in particular, is because these people, about whom we know nothing, and come from the kind of cultures that you have just articulated, by the way, I want to stress that. These are the people who are inside these communities against the community's wishes. They are able to roam free. Under a reform government, that will not be the case. They will be detained and they will be deported.
Zia Yusuf, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Just before we let you go, I just want to ask you about this tweet from Elon Musk yesterday. Farage is weak, runny sauce. He won't let reforms stand up for their own people. He'll change nothing of significance politically. Go with Advance UK, Ben and Tommy, presumably referring to Tommy Robinson, for the real change that's needed to save Britain. What's your reaction to that? He's one of the most powerful communicators in the world, Elon Musk. Do you think that that's an unhelpful thing for him to say? Do you worry about him saying things like that?
We don't worry. I think, look, I'm an entrepreneur. I think Elon is the greatest entrepreneur of all time. That's my opinion. I think his political judgment has become extremely poor. To put it mildly, he spent hundreds of millions of dollars of his own money to get Trump elected, and then within months betrayed him and started attacking him, said he was going to launch a new party in America. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. So, look, Elon tweets all sorts of stuff. We're focused on getting our message out to the British people. We now have, on average, a 10-point lead over the current government. We take nothing for granted. We need to make sure that British people understand that the only way we will sort these issues we're talking about, Susanna, and start improving lives is a reform government.
When he says Tommy Robinson is the real deal, what do you think about that? What is that real deal?
You'd have to ask him it. I'm not a spokesman for Elon.
Is Tommy Robinson ever going to be welcome within reform?
No.
What you just watched is a proper stress test of whether a hardline immigration argument can survive sustained questioning once it moves beyond slogans and into mechanics. At the centre of the exchange is Zia Yusuf, trying to do two things at once. First, he wants to present reform's immigration position as clear, firm and morally justified. Second, he wants to show that the existing political class, including the media environment questioning him, has spent years dancing around obvious truths that ordinary voters can already see. That is why his tone matters. He is not approaching this as a technical policy seminar. He is approaching it as a confrontation over honesty, state capacity, and political nerve. Ed Balls and Susanna Reid, to their credit, do not let him stay in the abstract. They keep forcing him into practical questions. What happens if someone destroys their documents? How do you deport people to countries the government itself says may be unsafe? What do you do if legal barriers, foreign governments, or international obligations get in the way? That is exactly where any serious immigration proposal either gains credibility or starts to unravel. And this is where the exchange gets interesting, because Yusuf's answer is not really that every operational detail is already solved. His answer is that the current system hides behind complexity as an excuse for inaction. That is a very important distinction. He is basically saying this. Yes, there are legal obstacles. Yes, there are practical barriers. Yes, there are people who arrive without documents. And yes, there are countries that may resist returns. But none of that changes the bigger point, which is that a state that no longer controls entry, removal, and enforcement is no longer behaving like a serious state. That is the emotional and political center of his case. Now, whether you agree with every detail is a separate matter, because once you move from principle into implementation, the problems are real. Deportation policy is not just about political will. It is about detention space, bilateral agreements, court challenges, evidentiary standards, and what to do with people whose nationality cannot be easily confirmed. Those are not trivial objections. They are the actual machinery of the issue. But here is why Yusuf still lands punches in this clip. He understands that voters do not need every legal detail explained to know when a system looks broken. If large numbers of people arrive illegally, remain in the country for long periods, and are rarely removed, then the public conclusion is obvious. The system is not working. Everything else sounds like excuse management. That is the trap Ed Balls and Susanna Reid are partly caught in during this exchange. Their questions are legitimate. In fact, they are the right questions. But because the public mood on immigration has hardened, those questions can also sound like procedural defenses of a system many viewers already think has failed. So even when they expose gaps in Yusuf's plan, he can still come out stronger if the audience thinks he is at least confronting reality while others are managing decline. That is a very important lesson in political communication. Competence matters, detail matters, but clarity of purpose matters too. And Yusuf's side of the argument has clarity. It says illegal entry must carry consequences, removals must happen, and a government that cannot enforce borders has forfeited public trust. That message is easy to understand, easy to repeat, and easy to connect to wider frustration over housing, policing, public spending, and national identity. The interviewer's side has a harder job. They are trying to expose complexity and force precision. That is good journalism. But complexity rarely wins emotionally unless the public still trusts the institutions explaining it. And that trust is exactly what has eroded. There is also a second layer here, and it is the most politically significant one. Yusuf is not just arguing about immigration, he is arguing about sovereignty. The debate over document destruction, asylum processing, country returns, and legal barriers is really a debate about whether British governments still have the ability and the willingness to enforce decisions inside their own borders. That is why these discussions get so intense. Because once immigration becomes a proxy for state competence, every failure feels symbolic. It is not just one policy area going wrong. It becomes evidence, in the minds of many voters, that the country is no longer being governed in their interest. The questions about Afghanistan and Iran also expose another pressure point. Hardline rhetoric becomes much harder to sustain when it meets countries associated with genuine danger or legal restrictions on return. That is where public policy becomes morally and legally complicated. Yusuf's answer is essentially that complexity cannot be allowed to swallow the rule. His critics' answer is that ignoring complexity can lead to unlawful or unworkable policy. Both sides understand the stakes. But the side that sounds firmer often wins the clip. So what does this moment actually show? It shows that Reform's immigration argument is strongest when it stays focused on state failure, public frustration, and the principle of enforcement. It shows that media scrutiny is strongest when it forces that argument into real-world constraints and asks who, how, and under what law. And it shows that the political advantage often goes to the side that seems more willing to name the failure, even if the full solution is harder than the slogan. This exchange does not prove that every reform proposal is ready for implementation. It does not prove every objection from Ed Balls or Susanna Reid defeats the underlying case either. What it does show is why immigration remains one of the most combustible issues in British politics. Because beneath every policy detail sits a deeper question. Does the government still mean what it says when it talks about control? And for you as a viewer, that is the method worth keeping. When a politician makes a hard promise, ask how it would work. When an interviewer raises legal barriers, ask whether those barriers are being explained or used as cover. When the state says it is in control, ask what the evidence actually shows. That is how you separate performance from substance. If you want more breakdowns that focus on pressure, structure, and which arguments actually survive when they are tested live, make sure you like the video and subscribe.